What's going on, Creator Factor fam? I am your host that loves you the most, Ozeal, and I want to welcome you to the show, the Creator Factor podcast. This is where we talk media, community, and business for our fellow business-minded content creators. And today's guest is a homie of mine. He's a friend of mine who knows a thing or two about branding, about building a proven brand strategy. Okay, let's get specific here to help you generate more leads and more sales for your business. And, you know, if you guys know me, and if you don't, I'm about to let you know that branding is one of my favorite topics to discuss. And I do believe, even in my practice as a podcast consultant and a coach, the most successful content creators and businesses understand the importance of having a great brand. And our guest today, he believes that there's a whole new way to build a brand. And it's not what you may think. It's not a logo. It's not the website. It's not the colors. It's a lot more deeper than that. And he has 13 years of experience, y'all, of transforming brands for, law firms. He's worked with accounting firms. He's worked with billion-dollar credit unions, an array of industries. And he's also earned some stripes, a double Crystal Award from the American Marketing Association of Houston. He's the founder of Avalere.com, and the host of the podcast Boring to Badass, where he helps businesses turn their business and brands from boring to badass. I've been on the show. I'm excited to have a fellow podcaster in the house. He's a friend of mine, Creator Factor fam. Let's welcome to the show none other than Justin Lynch in the house. Justin, how are you feeling today, man?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on, Ozeal.
Any coffee this morning, man? Are we how are we doing? Are we caffeinated? Are we ready to go? Yeah.
I had coffee earlier. Yep. Ever since I had kids, I'm at least a cup a day coffee drinker.
Start your day with coffee. Yes, you got to. You got to start it off right, man. You got to start it off right. Well, listen, man, as I mentioned in the intro, I'm excited, bro, because obviously, shout out to Mega Minds. I mean, we're friends, and one of the things that I have admired and have a lot mad respect for you, man, is really immersing yourself in this world of branding, which I believe now more than ever, as we know, even as content creators or audience, they understand that, branding is something that you can't skip. You said something, and you mentioned that, branding is dead. Let's elaborate on that and talk to us a little bit about what was the pivotal moment when you decided, okay, I'm going to switch from the way I think and helping my clients. I really understand branding from this perspective. Share with us that moment and please elaborate.
Sure. Yeah. So when I say branding is dead, it's about the old school way of branding. So it used to be, you create a nice looking logo, you create a cool tagline, you throw it up there, and people would say, "Hey, I have a brand." It would get you attention. And that was really before, the 2010s, when the internet really started taking off, social media started taking off, people started building personal brands. That whole old school concept of how you built a brand went out the window. And what really emerged is, in Ozeal, you do this with your services and your show too, is who am I trying to talk to, right? Who am I trying to connect with? Who am I trying to help? And that's where the shift in branding has started. And so, when nowadays, when I look at building brands, it always starts with, who are you trying to attract? Who's that ideal customer or client that you want to attract, and you build the brand around that. And we'll go more into that as well. And you had asked what had started kind of that thought process and where I went from there. So I can think of two big key events that really kind of kicked this off and led to where I am today. The first was when I worked as a full-time graphics designer at a credit union here in Houston. We were looking at potentially updating the brand of the credit union. And I remember being on a call with my boss. We were in his office and we were talking to an agency that the credit union had hired to start the process of updating the brand. For a lot of reasons, it didn't go through. But in that call, one of the things is, so they started asking us about, okay, what your brand, some basic questions. And then they started trying to get into more of the look and feel of the brand, which is understandable. You have to do that for any brand. But I felt like they bypassed a whole bunch of important questions. And then they started asking questions like, well, if the credit union's brand was a celebrity, who would it be? And if the credit union's brand was a car, what would it be? And I was like, what does this have anything to do with the brand and the members we're trying to serve as a credit union? Like, why does that matter? It made no sense to me. My boss had this look on his face too of like, man, this is just a waste of time. Because at the end of the day, they were trying to get to important things, but the way they were going about it, that was the old school way, right? As you would always hear, oh, what if your brand was a car, what would it be? And there's validity in that approach in terms of like it helps simplify things for people, but I feel like it's a backwards approach and it doesn't build a brand the right way. You're too worried about the visual and the tone, and you're not worried about who you're looking to serve and where you're going to meet those people.
You got me excited, man, because one of the things that resonated, and really kind of digging into your personal philosophy as it relates to brand strategy is you and I have that commonality in that it's community first, right? Mm-hmm. For me, it's community first. Like always, when I run and help launch podcasts, work with my clients, when I say start with the brand, it's not about the artwork, right? Logo, like with your case, it's not about the colors. Yes, the tonality of the brand, the branding voice or messaging, all that matters. But you and I have that common philosophy, and it starts with your ideal client. It starts with your first listener. Who is your ideal listener? And I love that because I feel like everybody just talks about just in general, but all that really doesn't matter when you launch the product or service or a podcast. You don't know specifically who you're serving. So I love that about you, and that we have that in common, because I feel like a lot of people misstep that when it comes to launching anything. Yeah. In your experience, Justin, talk to us a little. Let's talk about that ideal client, man. What are kind of some of the most common misconceptions businesses have about identifying that ideal client?
Yeah, probably the biggest one is putting too much emphasis on the demographics and not enough emphasis on the psychographics. So,
yep.
Talking about, people focus so much on, what's their job, what's their income level, right, all this stuff. And you need that information. Like, that's something you can't just ignore. You have to have that information. But that information really is just used as a baseline to inform the other information that you're going to pull out about that client, which is really the psychographics. Like, why do we care what income level they are? Yeah. Other than, do they have the budget, right? Or maybe they live a certain lifestyle. Like for me, in terms of demographics, I'm more interested in what is their family life like? Like what life challenges are they going through? Because age matters for certain things, right? So maybe you have health issues. Obviously, as we all get older, our bodies start falling apart, unfortunately. But, age doesn't dictate whether you have kids or what age your kids are. I know people who are 10, 15 years older than me that have kids my kids' age. We're going through similar things based on our lifestyle, the fact that we have kids around the same age, but our ages are different, right? So that's where the demographics only tell you so much of the story. And that's where you've got to start getting into the psychographics. Start thinking about what challenges are they having in their life right now? What type of transformation are they seeking? And then where does your service fit in that transformation? And helping them realize that your service is the best solution for them. Why is it the best solution? And helping them understand, this goes into kind of the brand story. And if you've ever read the Story Brand book by Donald Miller, it's a really good book. Some things I disagree with, but overall, it's a great book if you're interested in branding, especially on the messaging side. But one of the things he talks about is you have to lay out the stakes for someone. What is at stake? What happens if you don't achieve the transformation you want? And what does life look like if you do, right? You have to build that picture. And the only way to be able to do that effectively in your branding and in your messaging is you have to think through it and build that out and do the psychographics part of building out that ideal client profile.
Talk to us a little bit about for our content creators. It's gotten really competitive, for a lot
Mhm.
of creators to really stand out, and I'm curious to know kind of what are some effective ways that specifically content creators can stand out in a crowded market without resorting to gimmicks and all the other things that we see creators try to do.
Yeah, one of them is have a differing opinion than the majority,
Come
right?
on, man. Come
But
on.
as
Yeah,
long as you live that, right? Don't just have a different opinion just to have a different opinion to say,
that's
hey,
right.
I'm going to do it just to draw attention to myself. If you truly believe that, then shout it to the rooftops. Like my big thing I always say is like traditional branding's dead because I believe that.
Yeah,
Right. That's a might not be super controversial, but there's a lot of other things that might be more controversial. But if you have a take on something that goes against the grain,
yeah.
leverage it. But you got to live it. You've got to make sure that you show that in the brand and in how you show up every day as a creator. Um, it's interesting because some of probably the most successful content creators become known for one thing, right? They might be known for a lot of stuff, but they come like they have a almost like a gimmick, but it doesn't have to be a bad gimmick, right? It becomes a thing that they're known for. So I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I read a lot of content, and there's people on LinkedIn who have now become influencers on LinkedIn, but they've done it because they've picked one thing that they've become known for. So, you know, there's a guy on LinkedIn that he helps businesses. Like his whole thing is how to stand the fuck out, right? That's his thing. It is, and that's what he says, and he puts it on everything. But he has a show,
It's a bold
and
statement right there. All right, all
yeah,
right.
but like it's a thing, but that all his content, he has that sharp edginess to the
Yeah,
way he talks, to the way he
a
presents
tone,
himself.
right?
You can tell that's his personality and it shows through. And he's become known as, okay, well, if I want to be a little edgy and stand out, right? Who am I going to probably hire as a coach? Probably him.
Yeah,
So coming up with something, figuring out what you want to be known for, and also focus on that because that's a big challenge I think of all creators, right? Is we get shiny object syndrome, like, oh, that looks cool, or I also do this, and we're all multifaceted people. We all have a lot of different interests, a lot of different things, but what we have to figure out is how do you take all of those different things that make you unique but condense them into a singular thing that you want to be remembered for.
I love that. Well said, Justin. I love everything you just said, man, because we've had discussions about this topic, and as a matter of fact, recently I had a discussion with a fellow creator, and it was the same. She was struggling with, how do you find your voice? And if I talk about, video marketing in this sense, how is this going to stand out with a lot of people that are talking about video marketing? And I went back to our conversation. It's like, I think now the POV is the new way to market and really stand out. I think you have to have a point of view. You have to plant your flag. And we talked about this. It's like, I think you and I are kind of defining that as well. Like for me, it's like, okay, I'm discovering that forget everything else that you learned about launching a successful podcast. Now it's about community first. Like that's
Mhm.
my single-minded message. Like community first. Think about who you're serving. And like you as well, like your ideal client, like really take some time, before you do everything regarding brand strategy, of really understanding who is your ideal client. And I just do feel like now is the new way. And I challenge for our creators that are watching and listening is, what is your point of view? Like, what is the thing that you want to be known for? And before you start thinking about, well, I don't want to be, pigeonholed to this philosophy or this way of thinking for the rest of my career. And we're here to let you know, I'm sure, Justin, you can agree, is that no, you're going to evolve. We as human beings, we understand that you're not going to be the podcast person or this person for this, but you're going to evolve. Your philosophy is going to change, but I think it's very important to stand out, to have a point of view. It's just a way to really kind of break through the noise, right, Justin? I think that's just
Oh
the
yeah.
way to do it these days,
Yeah,
man.
there's a few things too, if you want to talk about like niching down, right? And
Right.
that was a challenge of mine too. And I had the same fears that everyone does, right? Which is, oh, I'm going to shut off all these other potential um, clients or guests or whatnot. But the reality is, the best way to attract the people you want to help serve is by niching down. And it's important to remember, niching is just it's a marketing tactic, right?
Mm.
It's how you're presenting yourself. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that just because you're a creator and you're saying these are the types of people I want to help with my content, it doesn't mean that other people outside of that scope aren't going to find value in your content. And there probably is going to be tons of people who do, and you may eventually expand your audience, but you expand it because you started small
Mm-hmm.
and you grew it and you found, oh, these people who I never even thought of have now found value in this. And why did they find value in that? Right. So that's where, when we think about niching, remember it's just a marketing thing. You can still
Mm-hmm.
serve all kinds of people. It doesn't mean that you're immediately saying no to every single person who doesn't fit this one demographic that you've identified. It's just a marketing tactic. And then I know another one that I personally eventually kind of had to figure out in terms of niching was, once again, especially as a creator, like separating the persona you've built for yourself and who you are as a person, right? They're still integrated, right? You're not going to build some fake persona that doesn't work. You've got to be authentic. But once again, how you show up is only a small part of who you are, right? Ozeal,
Mm.
like we're both parents. Just because that might influence how I talk about things or what stories I share. But my kids know me as dad, not as a podcast host or a business owner, right? People know us for different things. And so that's important too when you
Good
niche
point.
down, is realize that your total identity is not just tied to whatever persona you have in what content you're creating. That is only a part of you. And it's okay to say in that little part, these are all the things that are true about me and what I'm going to share, and everything else people don't have to know about, but they're still part of you, but they don't have to know about that.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I love that. When we're talking about, your ideal client, your ideal listener, can we break down like what are some kind of key metrics, specifically for content creators to pay attention to regarding their ideal, in this case, listener or clients for a lot of our creative entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So we'll go into a couple of different ways. It's always a challenge though, because branding's so integrated into everything that it essentially influences almost every metric in a business. So it's hard sometimes to really specifically say, hey, I tried this strategy or I went in this direction and here's what happened. And I can attribute that exactly because of the strategy, not because of anything else, right? That
Mm-hmm.
becomes really hard to do. So what you want to look for are variables, are ways that you can isolate things based on a brand strategy. So one of them is, especially as a creator, is looking at whatever metrics the platforms you're on will give you in terms of your audience.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for, hey, I want to attract, in my content, I'm looking to serve stay-at-home moms and who are trying to balance keeping the house clean. Maybe they run a side business along with doing all the school and stuff with their kids. Like that's a lifestyle for a particular person. And if your content is helping those people, look for your metrics. And if they're telling you, hey, 80-90% of people in your content is women, then you're probably on the right track. But if you
Right.
looked at your content and said, well, 60% of your audience is men, like
Yeah.
there might be a disconnect there. Um, and then, the other thing too is as a creator, Ozeal, you're big on this, is building the community. So if you build the community, so you're not just creating content to inform, but you're actually building the community, use that relationship with the people you're helping and ask, hey, why are you tuning in? What are you getting out of this? Actually talk to people. Because at the end of the day, your brand strategy is to attract the right people to your content and make sure that they're getting value out of it. And then, on the flip side, on the business side of it, which sometimes as creators we forget about, right? At the end of the day, it's still business. We got to make money. So, um, looking at, your sales and everything too, and trying different things. Maybe you try a new messaging. If you're going to try a new messaging for your brand, try to keep as many other variables static as possible, right? So don't change anything else other than the messaging for 2 to 3 weeks. Does that influence sales or not? What else could have influenced them? Because, like I said, it's so hard to know if a particular brand strategy gives you a result. But the more you can isolate it and say, I did this one change and I didn't change anything else, what happened? And that's going to be the key, is figuring out how you isolate the variables that matter to your business, isolate them as much as possible, give it time, 2 to 3 weeks typically for something, and see what the results are.
Justin, what are some emerging trends that you're seeing? You're again, as I mentioned, you're very immersed in this space, and you are evolving as a brand strategist yourself. Are there any trends that you see in brand strategy that creators should start paying attention to?
Um, so one would be how you leverage AI. So that's always a hot topic.
The big A word.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, bring it out.
And we can tie it to a different A word, which is authenticity, right? So
Mm,
being authentic. My thing that I've told a lot of entrepreneurs or solopreneurs or content creators that I've talked to when it comes to branding and leveraging AI in their business is, what you need to do is really what use AI to automate or make more efficient things that don't rely on you personally, right?
mm,
So I would rather automate things inside my business, like business processes or whatnot, and allow me personally to continue to create content. I would rather write on my LinkedIn post so it's coming directly from me and not an AI, and use AI to run other parts of my business.
mm.
So, use the AI to automate and make things efficient that don't require the unique personality of yourself. So that way you have the time to actually spend on the things that do matter, which are unique to you. So that's something, when I've had those conversations with people, some people have like, oh, I didn't think of that. And I've already, other people I've talked to are like, yeah, that's what I've started to do, because I can't replicate myself. AI can't
Yeah.
replicate who you are, your unique personality, what you bring to the table. So don't try to have it replicate that part of it. Buy yourself time so you can continue to make content, and buy that time with other automations or AI.
I'm glad you mentioned that because we just had, Mark Savant. He's really big into AI and automation. And one of the things that I'm always, and this is kind of like what I'm seeing a lot of, and I'm glad you being a brand strategist is reminding content creators who are listening and watching this, and that, AI is going to be a tool to make our lives a lot more efficient, great for automation, definitely for back end operations, etc., but not to replace who you are. And I'm
Mhm,
glad that you highlighted that, and that it's not there to, replicate or replace what makes you unique,
mhm,
right? Because we need that part, or else we're really going to sound like robots. And as we all know, like AI, after a while, you can tell if you use it enough that, oh, that's definitely AI generated.
mhm,
So it's an important reminder for creators to use it more as an assistant, as a consultant, maybe, but not use it as a way to replace your whole brand strategy, because at the end of the day, it's about your voice, your POV, and what you bring to the table in your industry. So I'm glad that you dropped that on us, man. If there's one creator factor, that every creator should learn and master, what would it be?
hmm. That's a good question. I would have to say, so going back to the authenticity, but taking it a step further. So not just being authentic, right? Because everyone knows that. But how do you manage, and I feel like this is where it is you need to be able to manage your authenticity with the business and who you are outside of the persona you built, right? So how are you managing that day to day? The best creators know who they are when they show up in their content, but they also recognize that that person who shows up is not the entirety of who they are. So that person shows up, they provide value to the people they want to provide content to, but they also have another part of them who has to be the business person, who has to make sure that they're generating revenue, that they have a legitimate business, and they have all things outside of their life that are influencing that. Whether it's I have a medical problem or I've got to go pick up my kids today, those things impact how we show up every day. And I feel like the best creators know how to manage the world outside of them so they can make sure that the world that they present in their persona is, the best type of person that can show up and help the type of people they want to serve.
Well said, my man. Well said. Avalier.com, and also the podcast Boring to Badass, which we'll have to make sure we link up our interviews, man. I had a great time being on the podcast. How's the podcast going, by the way?
It's going good.
Yeah.
It's been fun because one of the things I try to do is something maybe a little more unique is getting guests on that, for one, present different opinions on things, but also two, talking about not just so much the actual brand strategy, because if you heard someone talking every episode about brand strategy, you get boring, right? So talking about things around that. So I had a guest on who does executive branding. So if you are an embedded CMO at a business and you're working on the brand for the business, how do you brand yourself to continue to work up, be heard inside the organization? Ozeal, I had you on, we're talking about community, which is not a typical thing for B2B businesses, but it's something they should be leveraging, and they absolutely can. And so those are the types of things that I like trying to bring onto that podcast, is so you understand and you're getting information about brand strategy, but it's coming from a different angle than you might just assume. So it's not just someone pounding you day and, episode after episode of like, well, you need to do this, this, and that. It's like, no, here's what other people are doing in cool, unique ways. What can you take from that and allow the audience to take what they need to? They can leave the rest, but hopefully each episode they come away with something that they're like, I never thought of that before. And now I feel like my job and the way I approach things has shifted because I listened to that episode.
It's a great podcast, man. I really enjoy, watching and listening. And then of course, being on the podcast, talking about community was awesome. So highly recommend you guys check it out. Boring to Badass on YouTube. We'll make sure we link it up, and also soon to be available on your favorite podcast app. So stay tuned for that. And of course, Justin, we'll make sure we link his LinkedIn profile as well. So he's very active and sharing a lot of great brand strategy. We'll be sharing webinars and a lot of great content regarding how to attract your and build your ideal client profile and all that. So Justin, it's been awesome, man. I really enjoyed this conversation. We're gonna have to bring you back for part 2. Because this is a topic, again, I can go on and on and on and about. So we'll have to probably do a series on branding.
I'm down.
We'll have you back, brother. Well, thanks for being on the show, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ozeal. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. See you guys next time. Peace.